The great bounty of traveling with Enoch Olinga, the Hand of the Cause, for 3 months in South America, in every manner of situation, big cities, university talks, big public meetings, off in desert, remote desert spots, up into the Andes Mountains, climbing into small little hovels that were filled with the oil of llama droppings. Everything scintillated black, and Mr. Olinga was, being black himself, would disappear practically in those places. His eyes would blaze a little bit, and that was it. He would speak to everyone according to their capacity, with such kindness and such love. And he had the effect that we read, we see in, I think it's in Advent of Divine Justice. Shoghi Effendi quotes Abdu'l-Baha saying that if a Baha'i enters a city, they should cause a stir in that city. Something should happen there. By the strength of their character, by the illumination of their existence, something should happen. One place in Ecuador with Mr. Olinga, we'd been in the high Andes, and we'd had meetings with some of the Indian peoples there, and I think he'd spoken on Baha'i radio. There's a Baha'i radio station there. And then we took a bus some hours to a place called Quinindé, which had a few believers there, a handful of believers. They'd been preparing a meeting for him to speak to the people in the town, whoever wanted to come. And we got off the bus, and there's a whole bus full of people. They were all getting off, and there was a crowd of people there. And there were children. Children were immediately magnetized by Mr. Olinga. I was trying to see where our bags are, and I saw he already had his hand. He was holding 3 children on one hand and 2 on the other, and soon there were 10 on each hand. And it was stopping the functioning of the bus station, you know. It was right on the edge of the road. So he just walked out into the center of the road with them and started walking down the street. I'm thinking, wow, I have to catch up with him. The Baha'is, some of the Baha'is were with him. And he was walking along the street, and he was so happy. And this population was mixed. There was a lot of African descent people there, along with, they were all Spanish speaking, but they were in the city, there was quite a majority. And as he was walking along, it was a wide street, he was waving to people that were sitting on their porches, just gesturing like you would if you were a king. And the people kept asking me, is he king? Is he an African king? Who is he? Who is this man? And people just poured out and followed. By the time we walked maybe half a mile. 200 people with Mr. Olinga walking down the street, having no idea who he is, but just so thrilled that he's there. You don't see that very often. I go places, nothing happens, you know. He would speak with the Baha'is everywhere. When he was alone with the Baha'is, he would speak, forgive me, I'm trying to imitate his subjects, that he spoke about the soul, the nature of the soul, the spiritual aspects and dimension of human beings. That was his subject with the Baha'is. To the public, his talks were parallel to Abdu'l-Baha's talks. He told me, he said, Shoghi Effendi, when I was in Haifa, he was a knight of Baha'u'llah, had been amongst the first local assembly of Kampala in Uganda, taught by Ali Nakchavani and Mr. Banani and those people that were there. Shoghi Effendi, then, that was in the 2-year African plan, then the World Crusade began. Shoghi Effendi sent a letter to the local assembly. He said, it is his wish that the members of the community there would arise to fulfill the goal of Knights of Baha'u'llah in West Africa. This is middle, Central Africa is far. 1,500 miles or something. And I think it was 4 members of the local assembly, African members of the local assembly, arose to open countries in East Africa. All had been new Baha'is within the year, and Mr. Olinga was amongst the principal ones. He settled in British Cameroon at that time. And before many months he had asked for pilgrimage and been granted pilgrimage, and before many months he had about 100 believers in this place, and he'd also dispatched the other friends that had come there to the neighboring countries and helped to go sustain them. They became Knights of Baha'u'llah for those countries as well. It's so good that there were black Africans opening the countries in Africa. So soon after the African campaign had begun, just 2 years before that, we had little or nothing in Africa. We did in Ethiopia in the north, and we did in Egypt, but sub-Saharan Africa was, except a few Baha'is down in South Africa, there was very little. All of that opened up. Terrific development. And he went to Haifa. It wasn't a hand of Cause, but he was the Knight of Baha'u'llah. And when he was there, Shoghi Effendi announced that he had given Mr. Olinga a title, Abu Futu. Abu Futu means the father of victories. He didn't give many Baha'is titles. I know maybe 3 or 4, and that's it. So Mr. Olinga had that wonderful distinction. And he said when he was there, Shoghi Effendi taught him, and he held back a little bit, and then he said, he taught me all things. He said that there were no Persian pilgrims there at the time, and he assigned me to the Eastern Pilgrim House and sent Dr. Hakim to take care of me, to cook for me, take care of me. And it was the custom of the guardian that whoever was in the Eastern Pilgrim House, he would come in the car in the afternoon and go with them to the shrines. And then after that he'd go down the mountain and he'd briefly meet with the women from the East at the house of the Master, where Ruhiya Khanum was hostess to them. And then after that he would go to the Western Pilgrim House and have dinner with the Western pilgrims and discuss them. So anyway, as Mr. Olinga was alone, he said, I was alone with the guardian the whole time. He would come and we would walk to the shrines and he would teach me, and then he would pray in the shrine himself. He'd chant the tablet of visitation. We'd be there together. Then we'd walk some more. And then he told me, come to the house in the morning. I want to speak more with you. So he had the mornings with the guardian, the evenings. I've never heard of such a pilgrim. And Ruhiya Khanum said she'd never seen any pilgrimage like that either. He really invested in Mr. Olinga. And he said, what he told me, he said, is you must master Abdul Baha's approach to the public in his talks in Europe and America. And I've seen Mr. Olinga both in Panama and also in different countries in South America stand up before a hall of 500 people who didn't know what the faith was and deliver a talk that's so like the Master that I would say he's memorized the talk of Abdul Baha and take some notes and try to find it. I could never find it. He told somewhere else, he said that I have memorized some of the sections of talks. And he recommended the same to we as Baha'is of the West in several letters written to American believers, that we should master Abdul Baha's method of approach to the public. He said there's no way to surpass it. Abdul Baha didn't treat everything the same way. He had such a variety, so it's a big job. You have to read the talks and read the talks. Now, some people have them recorded. You put them in your car. You listen to them while you're washing the dishes. You have them coming into your head all the time till the phrasing of them and the approach, they were always logical, sound, rational kind of talks. He stresses in his own tablets that we have to use convincing proofs and evidences to establish the faith, not just feelings about the faith and how much we love it or how wonderful it is. Why is it wonderful? What does it do? Where did it come from? What is the difference between Baha'u'llah's teachings and the messengers of God of the past? And he very clearly says that there are great differences. He said he's heard from the clergy that this is just a rehash of past religions. Some of them attacked that in that manner. He said, I would have you know the originality of Baha'u'llah's teachings. And then he mentioned the principles that we all know. And it just doesn't occur to us, because now there's such a kind of natural, wonderful thing in humanity. I mean, you know, equality of men and women. Well, the Baha'is don't have an edge on that. But when it happened, we had the edge. I mean, Baha'u'llah is the first messenger of God to establish equality between men and women. You look in the Bible, the Jews believed the woman had half the soul of a man. It's common belief. She got more rights with in Islam. There were protections established, but not the whole. Now the whole thing has come on. And Abdul Baha in a tablet says very clearly that the soul does not have gender. Gender is added to the soul when it enters this world in a body. It takes on gender, either masculine or feminine, for the functions of the way the propagation of the race has been established, so many other reasons. But that tells us that inherently there's no difference between the soul of a man and the soul of a woman. Some people say, oh, they don't have the kind of soul that they could be members of the House of Justice. That's nonsense. They became the most outstanding teachers of the West. Women far outstripped men. Remember Shoghi Effendi? He says, he refers to a galaxy of Baha'i immortals in the realms on high, the greatest of them all. Who are they? Lua Getzinger, Mae Maxwell, Martha Root. She added Juliet Thompson to the group. Hai Dun, one man amongst that whole galaxy. He must be happy, huh? Amongst that whole galaxy of Baha'i women there in the next world. What's that? Then I heard Gail Wilson, she came back from pilgrimage with the Guardian, and she had a discussion with the Guardian, and he said that he extolled the hands of the cause and the great teachers of the faith. And he said the House of Justice is an administrative body. It's like a government administration. He said the Guardian won't go to those meetings all the time. In fact, he said he wouldn't waste his time going to the meetings. He would send a representative. Then if they needed something special, okay, he'd attend to it. But it was, he says, but the hands of the cause are the cabinet of the Guardian. This shows the exalted station of teaching the cause above any administrative post, including being a member of the House of Justice. And the House of Justice deferred always to the hands of the cause as members. The hands of the cause deferred to the House of Justice as an institution that was ipso facto the center of the cause after the loss of the Guardian. Not the loss of the guardianship, we have that, 36 years of it, and such a guiding force in the work of the House of Justice, constantly had to refer to the messages of the Guardian to see what he had said on a subject before they would open their idea even about it. Let us have the teachings on the subject from the Master and from the Guardian. So Mr. Olinga represented this wonderful thing, and I wanted to say a bit more about this, the role of women. Oh, also in the Caribbean, there were friends who wrote at the beginning of the expansion of the faith in the Caribbean islands, they established the first local assemblies. And Shoghi Effendi said the members of the local assemblies constituted the body of delegates that would elect the National Assembly of that area. There was 2 stages to this. Most places it began that way. Local assembly members were the election of the select of the community, were the local assembly members, then those would go to the National Convention and elect the National Assembly. But there were people, Baha'is, one particular Baha'i wrote to the Guardian and said, I live isolated, I'm a pioneer, I'm a teacher of the cause, but I don't have a vote because there's no local assembly here. I feel disenfranchised, and is this right? And the Guardian wrote back that it was a temporary measure, but that surely he would realize that being a teacher of the cause was a much more exalted function than any administrative post. or participating in the erection of the administrative post. An interesting perspective. Can you think of any Baha'i in modern times that outstrips Recollections? House members are not. Traveled everywhere, spoke, inspired the friends, went on a grueling trip really through South America, the Green Light Expedition, the older Baha'is will remember, and I hear there are sections of this on YouTube now, you should look it up. Green Light Expedition. Recollections going around and visiting Indian peoples in primitive settings in a very primitive way with canoes and outboard motors and riding on llamas, and she did everything. She said to us, she said, I do this so that the other women and the friends in the community won't say, this is too good for me, I mean, that's not good enough what I can be doing, I should be doing something. She said that if I can do it, any of them can do it, walking in mud and embracing Indians in the forest villages, and dancing with drunken Indians in the Andes. And some of that happened with some very interesting episodes. She says, these men are used to drinking. If this is the only meeting I can have, I don't want them put out because of that. And they listened to what she had to say. She said, it probably goes in easier if they're a little drunk. Because otherwise they get shy and resistant to what's going on. Very flexible, kind of a wonderful woman she was. I was a member of the teaching center for 15 years, and Recollections was a member of the teaching center that whole time as well. So the members had lots of exposure, and she would tell wonderful stories about Shoghi Effendi. She said that the African campaign changed the heart of the Guardian, revived him. That from 1941 to 1951, I never really saw the Guardian smile, she said. Broken-hearted because of what his relatives had, betrayed the cause. His parents had betrayed the cause. He announced the relatives. He never announced the expulsion of the parents. But he never announced any little Baha'i lady somewhere off in the wilderness. He had a wonderful cable about her unforgettable life and service as a cause. There's not a note about his mother or his father, who supported the rest of the family, It was a very difficult period, she said. I've seen one photograph of Shoghi Effendi would break your heart to see the sorrow on his face. It was taken for a passport, but couldn't mask the pain. My God. Shoghi Effendi, Abdullah says we should cheer the heart of Shoghi Effendi. You'll see if he's kept happy, if he's cheered, what he will do for the cause. And he did it anyway, but what would he have done if we'd kept him happy instead of the miserable lot that he had? In the end, he was very upset with America. The last pilgrim, they got a heavy load of it from him. The last pilgrimage in the spring of '57. He said, the cause in America has turned superficial. Look at this. Look at the Baha'i news. Wholly uninspiring organ. It announces Baha'i events. The World Crusade is on. Victories being made all over the world. Where are they? Why are they not reported here? Summer school schedules and appeals for your money. And then he said they have public meetings where nobody goes. And they speak superficially about the cause. Friends, if we want the cause to grow, we have to look at what the teachings tell us to do to prepare ourselves. We have to realize that every one of us has capacity, because Baha'u'llah has called every one of us to teach the cause. Okay, if you're very rich, you can deputize somebody else. But if you're not rich, you have to do it yourself. You've got to think, who do I know that I can shower with this loving kindness, with the Baha'i life, show the Baha'i life, and attract till they ask me, what is it that makes you so different from everybody else? And this is really what the challenge is. And absorbing the talks of Abdullah, I would say, it's caused I was working this last year because of the centenary, so focused all our attention back on it and saw these letters of the Guardian about concentrating on a profound study of the talks of Abdu'l-Baha, utterances of Abdu'l-Baha in America and Europe. He says the same thing in so many different ways, in so many different manners, depending what his audience is. It gives you a whole repertoire, a variety. You can quote directly from Baha'u'llah's teachings. That also has a special power of itself. And obviously Abdu'l-Baha is inspired, but he's made it more applicable to the people. The manifestation speaks at such a level, it's his proclamation, his statements. Lo, the all-possessing is come, earth and heaven, glory and dominion are God's. Boom. Who can say such things? Challenge any false prophet to come up with anything inspiring of any sort. And then the prophet himself says, I don't want to be a prophet. If I could get out of this, I'd get out of it so quickly, but as soon as I turn away from it, I'm compelled by the most great spirit. I have to open my mouth and speak. And as soon as I open my mouth and speak, they attack. What a life Baha'u'llah had, really, when you think. The supreme manifestation of God, the return of the spirit of the blessed Christ, the voice that Moses heard on Mount Sinai, how the people treated him, how the world treated him, really. I think, don't you wonder if you were there at the time, would you have recognized? Would we have recognized? It's so much easier to recognize now. We've got a whole range of writings and beautiful world center and houses of worship and all kinds of things. So helpful to turn towards the cause. The House of Justice has a terrific burden to carry. It is a very, very heavy load. I was released from the House of Justice in 2010, and we got a house, a nice house, modest. It has a second floor. The second floor wasn't developed. I pulled myself up the stairs at the house when we went to look at it the first time. I said, oh boy, I'm not going to get up here very often. I had a bum knee and I don't know what else. Now I run up and down the stairs. I hardly knew what the 37 years in Haifa had done, But after that, my health has been coming back. And the other house members have had that similar experience. So then that gives us a little opportunity to serve the community in a more immediate way and to take part in the teaching work. There's not too much teaching work in Haifa, although, what can we say, I copped a plea. I had a class for the youth all the time, so I could both continue with my acting career and speaking to the Baha'i youth. So I used to entertain them every week. And it seemed to be effective. They gathered in great crowds and continued to come. You know how study classes are. The first time 30 people come, and then 20, and then 5, and then 2. And then the 2 fall asleep, and you say, well, let's end this course now. But that didn't happen there. Somehow they were engaged, and they were excited about seeing each other every Thursday or whatever night it was. It happened to be Thursdays for a long time. Gradually, there were about 170 came every week to a study class. And we studied basic Baha'i documents, like the dispensation of Baha'u'llah. We read it all out in the class, line by line, talked about it. We read out the will and testament of Abdu'l-Baha, the book of the covenant of Baha'u'llah. We read the statements that Shoghi Effendi had prepared summarizing the faith for the Special United Nations Committee on Palestine, which is a really brilliant, concise vision of what the Baha'i cause is for non-Baha'is to hear. What do you say when somebody asks you, well, what is Baha'i? If you're like me, you kind of clog up inside. You say, oh my God, here it is. Here's the moment. What am I going to say? Oh, it's a religion. Came from Iran in the last century. Oh, thank you. Finished. Closed down for the night. Where do we start? What do we say? I heard some of the friends who are coming, they say, well, they asked the question, it's a dynamic, youthful, dynamic movement in the world to create unity amongst all the peoples of the planet, to establish universal peace. And its power comes from a new messenger of God that said, this is what God wants us to do and what should happen in this world. All right, that gets a little more attention. Again, if you're not just talking with them on the bus, because you've got to deliver the punchline on the bus, you're not going to see them again, or at least make some impression that the Baha'i is something that they should pay attention to. On the airplane these days, usually people have heard something on the airplane. I find airplane passengers usually have heard of the faith. But if they don't, I embarrass them immediately by saying, you really haven't heard about the faith? I haven't met anybody in a long time that has like, you must live a very secluded life. Then it gets them a bit crazy, like, I have to go find out what this is. I said, Baha'i.org, you can find everything you need about it, write it down or something. If they're not actually interested in asking. What do we do? How can we spread the faith better? That was really the motivation of the meeting this weekend, but it was to gain strength from each other to be more resolved in doing that. We should be interested in the teaching victories or small successes, whatever it is that we have, sharing them with each other, talking about it at the feast. You know, I think we've all been at feasts where suddenly somebody says, you know what happened to me the other day? I was and they said they loved it and they wanted to come and they wanted it. We get so excited as soon as we find a little receptivity to the faith. Part of the receptivity, of course, is the matter of how we deliver it. If we don't deliver it right, we say, the people aren't receptive. You hear Baha'i saying, oh, I try to teach the faith, but nobody's interested. There's no receptivity. It's really... That's not the problem of the people, that's the problem of us. If we think there's no receptivity, we don't even try. And that's because we're not animated. If we're not animated by the cause, if we're not on fire with it, if we don't get up every morning and beg Baha'u'llah, Baha'u'llah, you've called me to teach the cause. Lead me to waiting souls. Help me to make contact. And then give me the good grace that when I meet one, I understand that I'm supposed to, that this is one and I'm supposed to do something for them. Instead of losing it and saying, oh, this old guy's not going to be interested. We don't know. Baha'u'llah said, Baha'u'llah and the guardian of Genirebits, we should deliver the message to people, whoever they are. Let them know of its existence. That's not the way he defines teaching. Teaching is actually teaching them the faith. But proclaiming the faith, announcing the existence of such a thing, informing people of that this is in the world now and is a tremendous resource and wonderful complement to human life. Okay, let's start with that, something like that. And see where it goes from there. If they show interest, then Shoghi Effendi says, then teach them the cause. And even that, you have to know how to teach the cause. And he says in the letters and tablets, we should learn the methods and principles of teaching the cause. Abdul Baha says that the teachings of the cause are like a medicine chest. All kinds of medication. You've got to assess the ailments of the person that you're teaching and apply the remedies in a progressive, proper manner. You give some strong remedy right at the beginning, you kill the poor patient before they... I see you have a red nose. You know Baha'is are forbidden to drink. God says it destroys your mind. Useless. You should know that first. trip, the poor seeker falls on his nose. Abdu'l-Baha says we should never in teaching introduce anything from the teachings which acts as an obstacle or barrier to the listener. It will, at the beginning, certain things will be an obstacle and barrier, but later they won't be, because they will have strengthened, they will have had some basis to bear it. He said, give them milk until they have teeth and then give them meat. Don't give them meat right off, gumming the meat, you know. They have no capacity for it. And he said the whole purpose of the faith of God is to bring people closer to God. If you introduce something from the teachings of God that causes the people to hesitate, that's against the whole principle of the cause. So one has to think about this medical chest of the teachings and which ones you can introduce. And that's why we pray to be guided and to be assisted so that we'll be inspired to what teachings of those teachings that we've learned, because you're not likely to invent Baha'i teachings on the moment. You're usually, something you've heard either from other Baha'is or you've read in the books. And he's telling us, read it in the books so you're not depending on speakers like Hooper Dunbar to tell you what it is. Really, he says that. No, he doesn't say Hooper Dunbar, but he says Baha'i speakers and teachers. This is just to kind of, create extra enthusiasm and excitement in us that we have the teachers moving around us. But then we have to go and do it for ourselves. We have to study for ourselves. We have to pray. Do we pray every day to find waiting souls? What are we doing with our lives? They're going to be snuffed out shortly. Abdu'l-Baha was telling them earlier, Abdu'l-Baha in one talk, he has an audience and he says, in 100 years, everyone in this room will be dead. He goes on to say wonderful things after that, but he gets the attention of the audience anyway. How many years do we have left? This scale of the good deeds and the other kind of things we do. We will assess our own. We make our own judgment. He says, bring yourself to account each day, because you're going to have the big accounting at the end. And it's going to look and see what you did with what you were given. Fortunately, we're not competing with each other. There's wonderful letters. He says that God only judges us on the basis of what we do with what we've been given. Bill Sears used to make an analysis of this. He said, let's see, we have two believers in the community. This guy over here has been given the capacity to count to 20. And this gentleman over here has been given the capacity to count to 100. The guy who can count to 20, he's worked himself up, he's counting to 18. The guy that could count to 100, he's worked himself up, he's counting to 35. He looks down at the guy who counts to 18, he says, I'm twice as good as this guy. No, sorry, you've got much more capacity and you're not using it. You're going to be in a difficult position. So we can never compare with each other how much he's doing more for the cause, he's doing less, I'm doing more than they are, I'm the only one in the community doing anything. None of that's any good. What do? That's why we have an exemplar. We have Abdu'l-Baha as the exemplar. We're competing with Abdu'l-Baha. We're trying to follow his example, which we can never reach, so that keeps us positive and moving, trying, striving, exerting ourselves to try to act in accordance with the way the Master acted. Friends, I don't want to tire you out with endless talks. Maybe you have some questions or some subject you want to ask about. Might be an opportunity for. I don't know whether I can answer or not, but I do have the capacity to tell you I can or I can't answer, or I can suggest something for the teaching. That's a good thing to learn with teaching the cause too, is to say to people, I don't know the answer. That's an interesting question. But I'm sure in the Baha'i teachings there's something about this. Let me go and find out and I'll tell you. People say, oh, I can't teach. What if they ask me about this? I don't know about that. I don't know about this. Just say you don't know. We had a new Baha'i in Bluefields in Nicaragua in the first year that I was down there pioneering. And he would bring people to us. There were several pioneers after the first year, and he would bring people to us to talk about the faith. So he'd say, well, how did you get them here? And the people would say to him, he would say, there's this new religion, it's so good. They said, what's the name of it? I can't remember. So, where did it come from? Who's the founder of it? He says, I can't remember the name either, but there are people here that can tell you about it. It is so good, it's so beautiful, it's so loving. And he would get the people there. That was the extent of his Baha'i knowledge, but he used the full capacity that he had of it to attract people to come to talk to us about the faith. It's marvelous. Dr. Mahathir said that when he'd brought in some tribes in the Mentawai Islands in Indonesia, he and his wife, and the Guardian was so pleased. That was the beginning of mass teaching in the Pacific. And he said, I was away, of course, as I handled the cause, I was away a lot. And when I came back, one of the visits, second or third visit to the groups, they told me that the census takers had come. And they were asking them about their religion. They said, well, you're all Muslims, of course. And they said, no. They said, well, what's your religion? They said, doctor's religion. Dr. Mahathir. So they said, doctor's religion? What is doctor's religion? Who's the prophet? He said, doctor's prophet. That was all they could do. He said, okay, for the next time they came back, they knew more, but that was the beginning. But they were firm, you know. They said, this is what we are. So we're all doctor's religion here. What can you tell me? How are you all doing? You're out in the boonies, but they aren't the boonies anymore. I was born in Los Angeles, and this was pretty primitive country out here in those days. Now imagine a house like this. Beautiful setting you have.
I have a question.
Please.
My name is Baddy. I'm from here in Corona. I'm kind of interested in the whole administrative aspect of the Universal Justice and how that really works. You know, once you're elected, what's your day aside from? I guess I'm just interested in learning how it all works. What's your day to day? What's a normal average day? A member of the Universal Justice.
That's the second time someone asked them that today.
Cool. So you should already know the answer. Should be easy.
Yeah, I've had a rehearsal now. I was explaining that the House of Justice meets normally 3 days a week. It would meet more. It has plenty of work. It could have meetings 5 days a week. But it has to carry out the work itself of what it decides. So the members all have different subjects that are their special area of responsibility, and they bring those subjects with an agenda item number to the agenda of the House of Justice. And as you go through the agenda, then the different members around the table present the issue that they've already circulated the background information, maybe a 20-page report on something, or an analysis of something in the writings that has to be considered. Usually you had a pile of papers to take home every night to read after all the day's work, so you'd be prepared with the background, the backup to the agenda items for the next morning. I was always too tired at night. I could never read at night. I would just fall asleep, so I didn't do that. I tried to do other things at night. I painted at night and did other strange things. So in the morning I'd get up early and then read all that backup. So that was the beginning of the day. Then we'd go and we'd meet at the shrines. 2 days of the 3 days we would meet at the shrine, either of Baha'u'llah or the Bab, and have prayers for the Baha'i world and for any requests that were there, and then proceed from there to the office, the seat of the House of Justice, for the meeting. That was Monday and Thursdays, that was the routine. Tuesdays, we met with the staff in an auditorium, and we had a devotional meeting there, prayers with the staff, and then the House of Justice shared some of the information and news from around the world with the staff members that were present there. Lots of the staff members, not everybody could come. There were custodians that were in Akka and gardeners in that area, all kinds of things. The main time everyone would get together with the House of Justice was the holy days. There's no local assembly, so there's no 19-day feast. And we had this devotional meetings, and we had study classes and different kinds of activities, social activities and everything else along with it. So we'd come to the meeting, the agenda had been built up through items from some from weeks ago or months ago that were pending on the agenda. They had an urgent agenda and a non-urgent agenda. And it was all urgent, but the most urgent things that had to be looked after right then were the first items that were discussed, and then they would be discussed, and the member that had brought the item to the agenda, he would write the decision of the House of Justice. I was sitting on the House of Justice the second day, and I thought, you know, nobody's voted on anything. What's happening here? They discuss it, and then next thing I know, they're talking about something else. Well, I asked about that a little bit, and they said the consultation has to be quick and rapid. Each one presents their view. If somebody presents a view that the others are happy with, nobody asks to speak. When nobody asks to speak, it means the last person that spoke is the decision. Very quick. So then the person would write down that decision. And that decision, we didn't have to have them read it back, because it would become incorporated in a document. And that document needed to be initialed by at least 5 members of the House of Justice to see that the wording corresponded with the decision that we made in the meeting. And that was the protection for the House of Justice. I mean, main items, major concerns. There was the draft of what was written would come back to the agenda. Many times, items, communications, memorandums would come back to the agenda and be read and be line by line corrected by the House in session. That was the case with the Rizwan messages. Generally, they came back. I was saying they came back. Sometimes 6 drafts came back, 7 drafts. Each draft had been thoroughly read and studied and revised and edited by the House in session and sent to be printed out again, and then it came back and more modifications. No, this second paragraph really is anticlimactic. Let's put that at the end, and this line really doesn't come to anything. Can we find a more precise way of saying what we want to say here? We've initially had a consultation, maybe the House would have had a consultation 3-4 hours, about what should be the content of the Rizwan message this year. And that would take place generally during the fast or maybe just before the fast. And then this series of a couple members would be assigned to work on the draft and then bring the draft back, and then it would be modified and so on and so on. Quite interesting procedure. And some agenda items would come on the agenda and the House would discuss it, and they'd say there's insufficient information here. Tell the teaching center to get the counselors to write a report about this situation, or cable it to us. Telex it. Now we have email and every other means of. I fear for the poor House members because the knowledge is so immediate and people want an immediate response. And it's not easy for the House of Justice to turn the thing around that fast. You know, it needs thinking about. Sometimes people get letters, they get discouraged. They said, I wrote the House of Justice, I never heard back. A year later they hear the House of Justice writes and says that due to the pressure of the work in Haifa was unable to answer your query, but the answer to it now is attached and here it is. Or we had the research department do a study to gather the text related to the issue that you've asked about, and those quotes are attached here. Meanwhile, we have, so-and-so fell down the stairs, and the pilgrim's in a hospital, and we have to arrange for the insurance to cover that and make sure that the family's informed, everything's all right, Or one of the Baha'i gardeners fell out of a tree and hurt his foot, and there's this endless information coming from a community of 600 or 700 people. You can imagine all the daily events of life are there. So we have filters that receive the first information, but if it's really important, it's serious, or there's some problem of comportment, it comes to the House. The House decides what to do. So the World Center administration is, I would say, is about 25-30% of what the House does. Just keeping things moving. hearing reports from the different departments, what they're doing, the projected things that they want to do. Then the whole budget phase of the year takes another month in the middle to examine the budget, to examine the state of the funds, to examine the state of the investments of the funds, to see that there's coverage for all the needs of the Baha'i world around the world. That's a teaser. So much more than that. Then you go to your desk and you try to carry out write the drafts of the things that you were involved in. Each member is doing that. Sometimes the member in the next office has too much of a load. He comes and says, help me with this because I've got to do that other one for the house hunters. And you're well informed on the subject. You take over and share with each other the loads. And you have new members that come in, and no matter what their experience is, after they're in the House of Justice for a few days, you see their well,
what for the youngins that are in that age where they're selecting a career or education path, what could you share based on what we know in the writings would be guidance as far as what's a good career path, what's a good education path to pursue?
Well, I'm speaking just from my own feelings about the thing, and there's no house decisions about that. Generally, they turn it right back to the individual. Abdu'l-Baha fairly consistently answered people's queries of that nature. He had that kind of guidance. Should I invest buying the piece of property behind my barn, or not? Abdu'l-Baha says, yes, buy it. No, don't buy it. He would actually give guidance like that. Can you imagine the nerve to write him and ask him that? You have a prayer book after all. Can't figure it out. Sometimes the pilgrims would ask Shoghi Effendi, where should I pioneer? Bill Sears tells the story. He says, I was at the table with Marguerite, and he was calling on us to arise. And we said, not where should we go, but where pioneers need? He said, Africa. He said, if we went to Africa, where should we go? He said, Johannesburg. He said, South Africa. I guess first he said South Africa. Then he said, well, where would we go in South Africa? He said, Johannesburg. He said, I didn't want to ask him next, he was going to give me the house address. They went, and that's just where they went, to Johannesburg. Phil says has an interesting sense of humor. He got an artist to make during those years of the first years of the World Crusade, there was a lot of stress on perseverance and staying in your post, Pioneers would get there with a job, and they'd have the job for a while, and then they lose the job. They write the Guardian, I have to leave my post, I've opened the country, but I have to leave the post because I don't have a job. He said, change jobs, find another job, do something else. Don't abandon the post. Don't let the new territories lapse back into virginity, he said. Virgin goals that had been won by the pioneers. So Bill Sears, he had a cartoon made. It was an island about the size of this living room here with a palm tree in it, and this bedraggled poor pioneer there with rags on and so on has just pulled a bottle out of the sea, and there's a message in the bottle. He's pulled the message out and he's reading the message, and it says, "Persevere, Shoghi." The Guardian saw it and laughed. Sense of humor. But it was like that. Just life or death. Don't. There's still places. We don't have countries to open anymore. But in our lifetime, you've got towns you can open, cities that have no Baha'is. Yeah, come on, speak. Why not? There's one open?
The Vatican.
The Vatican?
My husband always wants
To pioneer to the Vatican?
Baha'i in the Vatican.
Are you an archivist? You have to become a Swiss citizen, then you can be a Swiss guard in the Vatican. Well, this Pope is an interesting Pope. Pope Francis was a cardinal in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and earlier when he was, I don't know, bishop or something, he used to come regularly to the Baha'i interfaith gathering, annual interfaith gathering. He spoke several times there, and so he knew the Baha'is.
Of course.
And when he was elected Pope, the National Assembly of Italy said, let's send him a congratulations. And they sent him a congratulatory message saying that the National Assembly of the Baha'is was praying for him. They congratulated him on his election as Pope and hoped he would be able to serve the best interests of peace and mankind and so on. So the Pope is being interviewed now about what did it feel like to be elected Pope, and did you have messages from other religions? He said yes. Did you have anything particularly significant? He said yes, a wonderful message from the National Assembly of the Baha'is of Italy. He didn't go into details, but he said that quite openly on national television. The Vatican has been very rough on the Baha'i participation in the interfaith gatherings annually in Assisi. There is a annual interfaith dialogue. The Pope chairs it, and it has representatives of different faiths and so on. The status of the Baha'i community was observers. They got 2 tickets to come and observe the interfaith. When he saw that, when the Pope saw that, this Pope Francis, he said, no, they have to have full status. They are a religion. They should have status. So as of last year, after his election, the Baha'is have full status in this annual, which gives a chance for them to say things from the Baha'i teachings, which of course are very pertinent for interfaith dialogue, obviously. And then when I was there last December, they said that the Pope in one of his sermons had said, so powerful is the light of unity that it can illumine the whole world. Not attributed to where it came from. He didn't say where it came from, but it was quoted exactly in his talk. So pretty soon the Vatican will be whistling Baha'i melodies and not telling you where they're coming from.
You're mentioning the duties of the House of Justice, and I know in addition to all the administrative duties, they also play a role in social action around the world and the discourses of society. Could you mention a little bit about how the Baha'i world goes about engaging in the public discourses and how we choose what to become involved in, who we choose as representatives for those?
You know, most of this development, that particular development, was elaborated after I left Haifa. So I think that you should really refer to the messages of the House of Justice, because they've said exactly what they want on this subject in their major messages. And, you know, they're developing the discourses through having these special dialogues through the, what is it, the name of the university of their...
ISBG.
ISGP. Tell us out the title again. It goes out of my head as fast as it stays in.
Institute for Studies in Global Prosperity.
Institute for Studies of Global Prosperity, or in Global Prosperity. So they have courses with undergraduates and graduates relating the themes from literature in the current modern world and some historical documents, along with Baha'i documents, to broaden the understanding of how Baha'i should relate the teachings of the faith to the issues that society is facing. So it's in that sense. You were asking about career possibilities too. I wanted to go back to that a little bit. Duties of the House of Justice, the main source of what you should look at, if you haven't already studied it, is the Constitution of the House of Justice, where it reviews what its responsibilities are, because all of its activities derive from that constitutional statement. And that's the most great document of the House of Justice is its Constitution. Career, I would examine, if I were a young boy, I would examine things that are in the teachings that might give you clues as to what careers would be beneficial to mankind and which ones wouldn't. For instance, Abdu'l-Baha says that the missing link will never be found. Why would you spend your time as an evolutionist trying to see how man descended from monkeys? It's a dead end, you know. Why would you do that? But it's one of the subjects that comes up and people are interested. So there's other things like that. That just by a statement in the Baha'i teachings, I don't want to touch on medicine tonight, but that's a challenge too, because Abdu'l-Baha says it's in its infancy and there's obviously going to be major changes. We have a doctor here present, and he himself was saying how science, the paradigms shift and the way of looking at things is transformed. Allah pretty much says the first approach to healing is food, which seems like a really natural kind of a thing for mankind, doesn't it? I mean, you should be able to heal yourself to the right kind of foods. You have some imbalance in the body and you correct that balance and so on. But that hasn't been, it's being studied scientific a bit, but not as much as prescribed and man-made medications. Also, career right now, there's growing interest in water scarcity, water resources. Baha'u'llah says that every place should have clean water. It shouldn't be discolored, it shouldn't have a bad smell, and it shouldn't have a bad taste. Getting that kind of water to mankind is a divine fiat, it's a divine command. It's a wonderful career. Public health is an interesting one. It puts you in possibility of visiting different places around the world. Universal language. Helping the rights of women. Did you realize last year that Abdu'l-Baha was speaking about suffrage, universal vote for women when they didn't have it? And those were headlines. This is Prophet from the East says women should vote. That was a very startling subject. Beside that is going to mixed meetings of whites and blacks and speaking to them and talking about the interdependency that they have. And so many beautiful things. So race relations is another area of study. There's social areas of social study. I myself, I don't know, we can ask our doctor here, I myself do not urge people to go to medicine because it's so consuming. Sometimes I say, okay, if you think you could stand a career in radiology, okay, that has its hours, you have morning and evening, and you know what you're doing on the weekends. But most of medicine, as much as it is service to others, requires a terrific upset for the family and for the schedule to be able to have Baha'i schedule and have Baha'i activities and things. I don't know how you find it yourself. Maybe if you're doing trauma and you're doing emergency things, or you're doing sustenance.
Yeah, no, it's busy, and so Persian parents don't like my answer. I mean, I usually tell the kids to not go into medicine unless it's the only thing they can imagine doing.
Yeah, I don't know why so many want their kids. It's just prestigious to have them as doctors, I guess.
Yeah.
But lawyers, that's not a very help. Engineering is like, okay, you don't have to do that 24 hours a day. That's an interesting area, and there's so many different realms there. But also scholarly careers and education. Obviously, that's a big field for Baha'is. It's not very remunerative. But Shoghi Effendi said, we have now seen the contamination of education by materialism. Education now is not to acquire knowledge and understanding. It's to find a career that will make you money. And it's since his day, when he was saying things like that, it's worse than it ever was.
Didn't the Guardian or Abdul Baha advise someone against acting as a career?
There's a letter to India about that. It's saying because you may have to portray things that are unseemly, inappropriate. And besides, he said generally the atmosphere of the society of actors and actresses is challenging from the behavioral point of view. I was already an actor when I became a Baha'i. I had a terrific career. I was in 4 or 5 different things. Started off, and I was very skinny, 58 kilos, 130 pounds, or so 6 foot tall and 130 pounds. So just like a rod, if I turned sideways, I disappeared. And they put me in a tight turtleneck T-shirt, and I had to torture some little boy, hanging him over the side of a building. That was film number 1. Film number 2, I had a tank top. What is it? With the cut, with the arms out.
Yeah, they call them white beaters.
And I was practicing. I was a nerd, and I was practicing hitting a punching bag, and had a heart attack and died. The next film I tried for a film at Fox Studio. I had film tests and up a big heavy competition, and I had a major role in Bernadine with Pat Boone. It was his first major film in CinemaScope, playing a nerd again. And little did I know, but the first scene was in a shower room where I have to come out of the shower with a towel around me. By this time I'd become a Baha'i. I was fasting at the time this was being filmed. And I thought, the next film, what am I going to do? As a Baha'i, I think I better go pioneering. That was and I had a scene to gorge myself on hamburgers, and during the fast was scheduled for the 19th of March. And of course I hadn't negotiated that I have a 19-day fast and I won't be able to eat food during the filming. They would have said, fine, we'll try somebody else. So it didn't even occur to me to say such a thing. So I said, well, what am I going to do? I don't want to eat these hamburgers. So they were planning they had an outdoor day of filming on the 18th, and I wasn't involved in that, but they went out and it rained, so they had to come in. And the settings for the 19th weren't ready, but the settings for the 21st or the 22nd were ready, so they started filming sequence in those, which I wasn't involved in, and on the 22nd we filmed hamburgers. Thank you. Now's the time to say thank you and leave. So, not that I didn't want to be an actor so much, but I wanted to be a director. I was interested in films in general, and you don't start being a director at 19, so usually.
So despite that, what was it like? Because I know that's a challenge to a lot of people in the developed world in terms of pioneering their careers. They work all this time, and then they're faced with this challenge of what to do with their careers if they want to go pioneering, and some of the compromises they make.
And how many Baha'is do you hear say, become a doctor? That doctors are needed every place.
Yeah.
And you go anywhere and they won't let you practice.
Right.
Because they say, American doctor, that's a competition we don't want here. You can study medicine in Bolivia and you can get your, then you can practice. Another 10 years you're going to go back to school for, to be able to practice medicine in Bolivia. Or they say, you can practice in the countryside, but don't charge anything. How are you going to do that? How are you going to manage to stay alive? It's not a career. It's not an international career. There's so many careers that are bound by all kinds of things. Architects, for instance, there's building codes that are so different and difficult to learn. That it's hard to compete in another society unless you're world, international level. Then you can get a firm that carries out all the permits and everything for you and so on. There's that really, international careers, it's a special challenge. I think people need to think about it and look at it and talk about it. Fields of international cooperation, international policy, and law, international policy too. There's lots of organizations rehearsing for the lesser peace right now. They're learning how to do things that, that we didn't know how to do 20 years ago. Not that we're much closer to the lesser peace, but the Middle East is the juggernaut. The prophecies about the expansion of the state of Israel are pretty intense in the Holy Writings, in the Old Testament, and also confirmed by Baha'u'llah. We don't need to talk about that with the public, but it's there.
But aren't the concepts of collective security and other things pretty well established in the
That's
world?
well established, but also the lesser peace is a federation of nations that establishes once and for all the permanent borders of countries.
Yeah.
And that situation is not resolved there. So I don't know. Until that, it's like a boil that has to burst and resolve itself. What's going to happen, we don't know. What Shoghi Effendi did mention the possibility of a Third World War, and Recollections said they'd drive out along Mount Carmel back towards the Sea of Galilee to a town called Megiddo. When they passed Megiddo, Shoghi Effendi would say, "This is the scene of Armageddon," and it has not yet taken place. 25 kilometers from Haifa. So what that involves in the future, we don't know. Some mysterious things, yes.
Did I hear you just say that in Israel there's expansion going on?
The borders of Israel in the Bible, Paul says they will return to the kingdom of Israel will be reestablished. That the Jews have been forgiven by God. But we don't know that there's some controversy, but fairly straightforward borders are mentioned there.
I thought you meant that the faith was expanding in Israel.
No, the faith is quiet in Israel. Guardian said this is the heart of the faith. It should be quiet. The heart needs to be calm. And you still have religious parties in the government of Israel who have the capacity overnight to cause a crisis and say the Baha'is should be expelled from the country. We have some local Baha'is that are descendants from families of Baha'is. Most of those were covenant breakers. So we don't have a local Baha'i community. We have an imported Baha'i community. And until a secular government exists there, there's not going to be much prospect of teaching the cause. It's too much agitation. Caught a terrific storm when the Mormons come or the Jehovah's Witnesses and go around, trying to convert the Jews to something else. That's very strident noises and all kinds of objections in the press and so on. And they're establishing a Jewish state. The Guardian was there from the beginning, He didn't flee. The people of Haifa watched to see what Shoghi Effendi was going to do, and he didn't flee. Although what the Arabs were saying is, as soon as the partition takes place, then the Jews will kill all the Arabs. And of course Shoghi Effendi was an Easterner in that sense. He was a Persian. But he didn't go anywhere. And the Christian stayed. That's the largest Christian population Israel is in Haifa as well. There's a street right in the middle of Mount Carmel. It's called Abbas Street, named for Abdul Baha, and it's one of the only places in Israel where Jews and Arabs live in the same apartment houses, and just in the shadow of the shrine. It's curious. But the tensions are strong.
When you say the original boundaries, what would happen with the Palestinians then?
Yeah, that's the question.
Um,
I don't know how that works. But we do know, Yogi Effendi said that, think of what happened to the Jews for the persecution of Christ for 3 years. What does the martyrdom of the Bab and the 50 years of persecution of the Baha'is, killing all the prominent Baha'is, what does that imply for the Muslim world and for the Arab world? You hate to think what it might be. I mean, it's... Yeah, we can't go there. We don't know how it's going to be. We can't see into the future. We pray for the well-being of everybody involved, but without the State of Israel there, the Baha'i Center wouldn't be there. That's clear. After the mandate, the British mandate protected it. After the fall of the Ottomans, then the British mandate protected the World Center, and then the State of Israel now protects the World Center. They don't know it. They're defending the shell of the pearl of the kingdom of God on earth, Shoghi Effendi said. We can't tell them that now, but in the future they will take honor in it, that they were our defenders. So we want to teach them to be conscientious objectors. The Hezbollah, the Iranian radio announced after the Lebanese war, the Hezbollah's attacks on Israel and Israel's attacks the other way around. One of the ministers of the Iranian government announced that the aims and intention of the Hezbollah organization have not yet been fulfilled, and they must be fulfilled. And that is the elimination of the State of Israel and the destruction of the Baha'i World Center. And if you map the place where the rockets fell in Haifa, they're all around the World Center. They never hit the World Center, but they were close. Block off this way, a block off the bottom, 2 blocks off that side. But they didn't have accurate rockets. Now they have very precise. They have, what is it? I don't know how many times, 1,000 times the number of weapons they had before, and they have precise things that can land within a meter or 2 of where they wanted to land. They asked the Guardian, they said, Shoghi Effendi, surely the shrines will be protected. He said, not necessarily. He said, if they're destroyed, we will rebuild them in the future. But you don't get depressed as a Baha'i if you hear that if this thing blows up, it may well destroy some of the holy places. It's kind of a frightening prospect.
What do we know of the House of Baha'u'llah in Baghdad?
We know that a group of Muslims I'm pretty sure it was a Sunni group that decided that they would build a mosque in that old area. And they took this decision unilaterally because they wanted a mosque. That's a holy, wonderful enterprise. And they took out 5 houses, one of which was the House of Baha'u'llah. I've spoken with house members. They said, we can't find a single connection of Iran with that act, nor with the knowledge that what they took out was the House of Baha'u'llah, because it's called the Hosseiniya. It was a Muslim religious endowment, a waqf. and they destroyed it. It belongs to them, after all. It's just been in that state, waiting for some action to be taken internationally to return it to the Baha'i faith. It was partially destroyed in the time of Abdu'l-Baha, and he had it rebuilt. There was a young Baha'i, not known as a Baha'i, but he was a Baha'i who studied architecture in Iraqi, and was assigned to the maintenance and restoration of historic sites. And he was called on to survey completely 5 buildings in that neighborhood where the Most Great House is. And he included that house, the Hosseiniya, in his project. So we have complete plans of all the details of every aspect of the house, copies of which were sent out to the House of Justice. And we have the same for the shrine for the House of the Bab also. And we have a wonderful tablet from Baha'u'llah. He says that the holiness of the sacred sites is not dependent on the atoms and material that's there. That's regular material. But there's an atmosphere assigned to it, and that's spiritual, and it does not go away until it's changed by God. The Qibla has been removed from Islam, so the spirit is gone from it. It's gone now to Haifa, to Akka. Pretty challenging kind of thing, but he says if the holy place is destroyed and is rebuilt, then the spirit will be the same. So these are the great centers of pilgrimage. The 2 pilgrimages obligatory for men are either to the House of the Bab or the House of Baha'u'llah. House of Baha'u'llah in Baghdad or the House of the Bab in Shiraz. And there are tablets of pilgrimage revealed for that. Beautiful tablets. And Baha'u'llah sent Nabil to perform the first historic pilgrimage rites. And Martha Root performed them for the House of the Bab in her lifetime. It starts at the gate of the Quran up above in the mountains of it. And you have verses that you recite, and then you proceed down to the plain. At that time you cleanse yourself and put on a pilgrimage garb, and proceed then to the gate where the Bab met Mullah Hussein at the outskirts of the city. And the tablet says when you recite these verses, at that point he says that Moses, Christ, and Muhammad will accompany you to the pilgrimage site. And then there's wonderful verses, and finally you get to the house, and out of honor to the house, you don't go in the house. It's been possible because of the nature of the situation of the faith that we actually were able to have pilgrimage inside the house. But in the future, you'll get to the door. And he says, you get to the door, and you place your right cheek on the threshold of the front door of the House of the Bab, and you say this verse. And put the left cheek, and you say this verse. Beautiful. It's beautiful. I had the Afnan recount to me in English from the original tablet when I was in Shiraz in 75, 73. Gorgeous. It's for the future. If we do what we're supposed to do, we have to teach the faith and raise the cause up in the world. I think there's more receptivity surely than now than there was before when we were here. I mean, we were gone 50 years from the United States between pioneering and Haifa. Never mind, you let the youth do it. They're young and they have energy. I'm tired, I'm old, I'm going to sit down. Excuse me while I go to sleep. What kind of... Hello, wake up. It's time for you to die. Hello, can you wake up? Oh, you're already dead. I see. What is that? You know, what are you going to carry with you? What kind of favors are you going to carry to the next world? be mean here, but think about it. He says, go sit with the doesn't say homeless, with the poverty stricken, you know. Ask them their sufferings, what have they suffered in the path of life. He said, when you're listening to their sufferings, the angels will be rejoicing. Do we ever think of doing that? Do we sit down with the destitute? No, maybe scary. They're scary. I don't know. They may stick me with a AIDS injection or something. Crazy. I don't do it either. You go home and pray for me, will you? Pray for that poor man whose words exceed his deeds. Paul warns us. He said, don't. I wish you sweet dreams, friends.